All right, class, we are back and we are talking about the Sons of Liberty and still talking about the causes of the American Revolution. And the Sons of Liberty, they were a big catalyst for the American Revolution. They did all kinds of things. The Boston the Boston Tea Party comes to mind as probably their most famous thing, uh, where they went and dumped 342 chests of tea into the ocean or into the Boston Harbor. About 90,000 pounds worth would be about $1 million today. Uh, they intimidated the tax collectors with the Stamp Act. Stamp Acts when they first came about. So they played a very major role in spurring the American Revolution, and that's who we're going to talk about today. And you're going to see some names in here that we're going to talk about later too, like Samuel Adams for one. We'll talk about him next time. So they were a secret political organization though in the American colonies, and they protested the British taxes. All right, it started with the Stamp Act because the Stamp Act was the very first British tax imposed after the French and Indian War, and but by the end of it, there were chapters of the Sons of Liberty in all 13 colonies, and it started in Boston.
Who were the Sons of Liberty? The Sons of Liberty was a secret political organization in the American colonies that protested against British taxes and laws before the American Revolution. By the time the Revolution began, there were chapters of the Sons of Liberty in all 13 colonies.
All right. So how were they formed? They were formed in response to the Stamp Act, which was the very first tax that Britain placed on the colonies after the French and Indian War. And the first group was likely formed out of the Loyal Nine in Boston. All right, Samuel Adams was a part of that. John Hancock was a part of that. John Adams was a part of that. Several names that you'll hear throughout us talking about the American Revolution. But soon, after that, other groups formed too in New York and Connecticut.
How were they formed? The Sons of Liberty formed out of a number of smaller protest groups in 1765 in response to the Stamp Act. The first group was likely formed out of the Loyal Nine in Boston, with other groups soon forming in New York and Connecticut.
So how did they get their name? How did the Sons of Liberty, the name, come about? All right. Well, the name comes from a speech made by this man right here, Isaac Barr. All right. He was delivering a speech to British Parliament, and he referred to the American colonists as Sons of Liberty when arguing against the passage of the Stamp Act, and that is where the name stems from. Isaac Barr, this man right here.
How did they get their name? The name comes from a speech made in British Parliament by Irishman Isaac Barr. He referred to the American colonists as Sons of Liberty when arguing against the passage of the Stamp Act.
All right. So they couldn't do this. They had to do this stuff in secret. So they had to arrange secret meetings, or they might get arrested by the British if they didn't for protesting these taxes. So they had informal gatherings at the Green Dragon Tavern in Boston. They were held at night. They also met under an M tree in Hanover Square, and this is it right here. All right, and they called it the Liberty Tree. And in New York, when they'd have their meetings, they would put up a pole, and they would call it the Liberty Pole. All right, so these were all different things. Like I said, they had to have secret meetings in order so they wouldn't get arrested by the British soldiers for having a meeting protesting taxes because it was illegal.
They meet. The Sons of Liberty had to arrange secret meetings or they might get arrested by British soldiers. They had informal gatherings at local taverns such as the Green Dragon Tavern in Boston. More formal meetings were held at night. In Boston, they met under an M tree in Hanover Square that was called the Liberty Tree. In New York, they would signal the location by building a tall pole called a Liberty Pole.
All right. The first major act of the Sons of Liberty, though, was a protest of the Stamp Act. All right. And what they did, they took direct action. They would harass these stamp tax collectors. All right. And they would harass them to the point of where they were scared. They were very, very scared of them. And so they'd quit their jobs. They used intimidation, to do this. And they also gathered in large groups and protested in the streets. And their protests worked. and the tax for the Stamp Act was soon repealed. They repealed it, but like I said, it was just the beginning of Britain imposing these taxes and these new laws on the colonies because they decided, hey, we're not going to be bullied by you. So, but they did. They intimidated the tax collectors as a way to protest and would made them quit their job.
Protesting the Stamp Act. The first major action of the Sons of Liberty was to protest the Stamp Act. They took direct action by harassing the stamp tax distributors who worked for the British government. The distributors became so scared of the Sons of Liberty that many of them quit their jobs. They also gathered in large groups and protested in the streets. Their protests worked, and the tax was soon repealed by the British government.
All right. Like I said, the most famous action of the Sons of Liberty was the Boston Tea Party in 1773. All right. Britain had to place this tax on tea, and they'd made basically a monopoly, and they placed this high tax. Well, the colonists loved their tea, and saying they could only buy from them. Well, several members boarded the trade ships in Boston Harbor, and they tossed the tea into the water. And this act was a major event leading up to the Revolutionary War, because then, in direct response to that, Britain placed the Intolerable Acts upon the colonies, and oh man, it just went to pieces. Then, okay, they were all upset about it.
The Boston Tea Party. The most famous action of the Sons of Liberty was the Boston Tea Party. In protest to attacks on tea, several members boarded trade ships in Boston Harbor and tossed their tea into the water. This act was a major event leading up to the Revolutionary War.
And we'll talk more about the Boston Tea in detail, or Boston Tea Party in detail, when we get to that. So, but the Sons of Liberty, there were members of all different trades and skills and jobs. They had lawyers, they had dock workers, farmers, doctors, tavern owners, traders, publishers. All these people were part of the Sons of Liberty. And some of the more famous members include Samuel Adams, who is considered the founding member of the Sons of Liberty, and we're going to talk about him next time. We had John Adams, who was his cousin. We had Benedict Arnold, all right, who later became a trader. John Hancock, Patrick Henry, Joseph Warren, who would have been the very first president if he hadn't died at Bunker Hill, and Paul Revere, who made his famous ride. So all these were famous people that were part of the Sons of Liberty, but there were all kinds of people that were part of the Sons of Liberty that joined in on these protests.
Who joined the Sons of Liberty? The Sons of Liberty attracted members from all walks of colonial life, such as lawyers, dock workers, farmers, doctors, tavern owners, traders, and publishers. Some of the more famous members include Samuel Adams, who is often considered the founding member of the Sons of Liberty, John Adams, the second president, Benedict Arnold, a trader, John Hancock, Patrick Henry, Joseph Warren, and Paul Revere, who made his famous ride.
All right, time for our comprehension questions. Number one, the Sons of Liberty were first formed to protest what tax or what act? Was it A, the Stamp Act, B, the Townshend Act, or C, Mr. Shawn Act? It is A, the Stamp Act. It was first formed to protest the Stamp Act. This one right here. Ding, 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 ding. We have a winner. Number two, who did they get their name from? Where did they get their name? Was it Mr. Shawn named them? Was it B, Irishman Isaac Barr? Or was it C, Charles Townshend? It was B, Isaac Barr. Isaac Barr was delivering a speech to British Parliament, and he called the colonists the Sons of Liberty, and that's where they got their name. So B, Isaac Barr. Number three, where did they meet? A, at the Boston Massacre. B, they met in a newspaper. Or C, they met under a Liberty Tree, an elm, or at the Green Dragon Tavern. It was C, they met under a Liberty Tree for formal meetings, the tavern, and they also met in New York with the Liberty Pole. They'd placed it where they were going to be. So C. Number four, who did they harass and threaten during the Stamp Act? A, the tax collectors, B, Miss Sharon, or C, Mr. Shawn? It was A, the tax collectors. They harassed them to the point where they intimidated them so much that they would quit their jobs. So they would threaten them, and that's how they got them. Number 5, what did they do at the Boston Tea Party? A, nothing. B, they threw about 90,000 pounds of tea into the harbor. Or C, they took a swim. Is B, they threw tea into the harbor. And number 6, who's considered the founding father of the Sons of Liberty? A, Samuel Adams. B, Mr. Shawn. Or C, Isaac Barr. It is A, Samuel Adams is considered the founding father of the Sons of Liberty. We are going to talk more about him next time. But I've got to go in here and add our sounds to these comprehension questions too. But be sure you go on Schoology and you turn it in so you get credit. And I will see you next time right here to talk about the Samuel Adams. Y'all have a good day.